Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about. We had a major project last year. Those of you that have some rock influences might recognize that title. But this is really what we did. Some biosurveys up and down Maple River, and I'm going to show you what we did. I'm lucky enough that I get to present the data, but this is collected by probably at least 50 people. Some of the faculty are in the room. Here's the general problem. This is a really interesting number. 99% of all freshwater habitats on the planet are impacted by human activities. I think if we go forward, probably one of the leading limited resources as we go forward is fresh water, right? Another scary feature is as you take sips of this water, 50% of the water in North America is unfit for swimming or fishing. So freshwater resources are really in peril, and I think we need to put more energy and time into how we use those resources and how we impact the environment. If we think about the specific project we looked at, 40% of American rivers are dammed or have some type of dam. And that's about 79,000 of 250,000 rivers in North America have some type of structure on them that impede water flow. Okay. Dam removal started in 1913. It continues to now, to 1915. And actually, if you look at the scientific literature, there are about 54 studies over the 100 years that talk about dam removal. Not a lot of work. So we do these things. A lot of people remove dams without understanding the underlying ecology, chemistry, the sediments, and all this kind of stuff. Out of those 54 projects, only 10 of them have done a before and after dam removal. What happens to the ecology before and after we take these dams out. So that's just not a lot of work. And if we think about these, none of these papers have done anything beyond a single trophic level. We have the potential with this project to build a data set that's unique across the world. So what do we do? Here's the problem. Those of you who are familiar with UMBS, we're up over here. Here's the slide here. The East Branch, the Maple River comes from Douglas Lake. It's primarily surface water fed, some spring water. The West Branch is way over here and it's fed by some swamps, groundwater, and a couple of surface lakes. If we zoom in, here's Lake Kathleen here. Here's the East Branch coming in here, the West Branch coming in here. If we zoom even more, here's the dam, the old hydroelectric dam. Okay. Mark can probably help me, 100 years old, the dam?
Probably 1905 or so.
Washed out in the 60s and replaced.
50s.
So this is an old hydroelectric power plant that fed the lumber mill and fed Pelson with water. It's no longer functional, but the lake behind it is still there. Okay. If we look at the delta, this is the west delta. You can see where the river habitat ends, and actually if you go out here and walk around, it's really about a 2 to 3 foot drop. You say, oh, I'm in a river habitat, you take one step, and you're in a 5 foot lake. Dynamics of flow change that dramatically, and when we change the flow, we change the habitat, and what we figured out is everything else that changes. Okay. So we have some simple questions that we went through. What's there as far as the biotics? What's there as far as the physical habitats? What's there as far as chemistry? And hopefully, if they ever take the dam out, we can go back and say, how does that change post-dam removal? It's very simple. The question is very complex to organize all these people to do this. And as I said, we did this. I get to talk about it. But here is a list of people that helped. These 3 people, Jana, Emma, and Ruth, were the major players last year to collect a lot of this data and organize this. They deserve a ton of credit for this work. But Pat and Rex did a lot of algae work with Jana. Amy did some work with her class. Paul Webb did some fish work. Shannon and Dave with some ecology groups. The Lindo class. Brian came out with his insects class. So this was a really group project. And the one name I forgot to put on here, Paul Drevnik. I apologize if I forgot. So Paul Drevnik helped too. A lot of different people covering a lot of different trophic levels, some physical variables, some chemical variables. So we have probably got one of the most complete descriptive databases of aquatic habitat that I've ever really seen. So Here's Douglas Lake. Here's the airport. These spots here are spots that we've sampled. Here's Lake Kathleen. The dam is right about there. We went upstream and sampled. We went downstream and sampled to give you kind of a spatial array of what we did. We look first at sediment and chemistry. So what we're going to do here is Shannon's class and Dave Edwards and a group of the students went to Lake Kathleen, took sediment samples, took water chemistry, compared what's in the lake, what's downstream, so we can say what's going to happen when we pull out the dams of this water that's in the lake as it comes downstream. Now, for you that are not aquatic scientists, we go back, you know, the big difference between lakes and rivers is flow. And that really does a lot of different things. It structures what organisms are there, structures the chemistry, structures the physical environment, and just by altering the flow dynamics, we alter the ecology of all that. So it might be something small, you know, you go, oh, lake and river, obviously it's a flow that's different, but it really creates a different type of habitat. We have a whole bunch of lake animals and organisms and chemistry going on here, and a bunch of stream stuff that goes below. We want to see how it's altered. Okay, so chemistry. Don't look too much details on this, a little blurry. These sites over here are river sites, these are lake sites. The blue is carbon, and the yellow is the carbon to nitrogen ratio. All you've got to look at, if you look at the lake sites on the left side, you see a lot of carbon that's absent from the river. When we pull the dam out, all that carbon is going to come out of the lake and flush down the river. As we change the dynamics of the lake habitat to make it into a river habitat, I'm going to show you that in a second. When we change the dynamics of things that are going on in the river, all of this material, carbon and nitrogen, is going to flush down. It's going to change the dynamics of primary productivity. If we look at sediments, this is lake sediments. All you're going to see is this big purple here. Okay, that's fine sand. So remember that delta picture I showed you as the river bringing sand and silt and clay in, and it dumps it into the lake. You go to the lake, you've got 2 or 3 feet of muck at the bottom of the lake. As soon as we flush that out, this is going to come downstream. If we look at downstream, we see sand and gravel. If you've been in the Maple River, you know it's a sand and gravel type of habitat. So now what we're going to do downstream of the dam is we're going to take all the silt and clay that's accumulated for 100 years in the lake and dump it on the river. Change things, right? Okay, if we look at algae, right? And Rex and Jana and Pat sampled, we're going to focus on these 3 points because they were more interested in what's going on downstream and how that's going to change the release of this carbon and nitrogen as we change the structure of these habitats. And what I want you to look at is these blue here. They're the attached algae. So basically, I've done kind of like a habitat analysis where we look at motile algae and attached algae. And I want you to think about one of the things that's going to happen as we release these sediments from the dam and all these attached algae, all these sediments are going to come down like sandpaper. Scrape all this attached algae off. You're going to see this big bolus of algae that's swept off of the rock and gravel, taken down to Burt Lake. It's going to have to be replaced. We're going to have successional change in this algal community. If we look at macroinvertebrates, this is how some of us in the aquatic habitat look at macroinvertebrates. We group them by functional feeding groups. This is how they collect their carbon. And all I really want you to look at is this group, and this group. So shredders are those organisms that take terrestrial leaf matter and break it up, make it available for other organisms. The scrapers are the ones that are eating Rex's algae off of the rocks and sand. And the filters, what they do what it says, it takes things from the water column. So we actually have a planktonic ecologist here, a benthic ecologist here, and kind of a terrestrial linkage ecologist here as we think about these types of things. Now, we go to these same sites and we look at these distributions. This is complex, but the idea is we can measure the relative ratio of terrestrial carbon, plankton carbon, or benthic carbon into the ecosystem. And there's this concept, I don't want to go into too much detail on aquatic ecology, called the river continuum concept. that says the type of ecology in the stream changes whether you're in a headwater stream or you're way downstream. We have some of that happening down here, but right up here at the dam, we have a lot of shredders and a lot of filters. Those filters are taking all that planktonic activity that's occurring in the lake, that's getting washed over the top of the dam, and pulling that stuff out of the water column. As soon as we take that lake out, that planktonic carbon is going to be gone. The organisms are going to be gone, and the organisms that depend on these organisms are going to have to change. If we look at fish, a couple of things to note here. You got blue and red bars. The blue bars are called improved sites. So sometime we can mark, the CCC went in and built a whole bunch of fish habitats up and down the maple. I'm not sure when they did that. You guys know? Some time ago. It's a pretty old structure. But these structures are logs, branches, nailed together, and there's, how many? There's 30 of them?
49.
49, and that's just from the dam to the first road site.
Question?
Yeah.
So I've been up and down the river, and some of those old structures are degrading, as you might expect, because
Yes.
this is a meandering stream. And so I don't know if you have any thoughts about, maybe it's not the time, but think about whether those things are useful, valuable, or maybe not a good idea.
Yes. So 2 years ago, my little class snorkeler, I stayed inside where it was nice and dry and warm. They went snorkeling down the Maple, and they did an assessment of all those sites. And we have sites that are really ready to come down, and sites that are still functional. And what's interesting from Paul's data set, you see here, these improved sites are better habitats. These are brown trout. These highest marks here, these are blunted minnows. The trout are really using those sites. So something to think about is if we pull this dam out and we have this flush of water coming down, and those sites that are about ready to come down, are they going to come down? Do we need to go in and improve them? Because they're being used by the brown trout habitats. So if we have time before the dam comes out, you and I, or a bunch of shipbuilders, do we want to spend some time on the river repairing these sites before they eventually are gone? This is a world-class trout stream. If we remove these sites, these populations are going to probably drop. Something to also think about, these are brook trout up here. According to Paul Webb, I'm not a fish person, but according to Paul Webb, there's rainbow trout north of the dam. He's concerned that when we pull the dam out, the browns and brooks will go up north of the dam and remove the rainbows from the habitats. Something else to think about as we pull this dam is now we're taking a impassable barrier for some species, and we're opening up a corridor for movement. Paul's concerned about rainbow trout that exist north of the dam. So we should, at some point, have a conversation. Do we want to go into the Maple and repair these sites before these dams come out? This is kind of a whirlwind of tons of data. But we can make some predictions. We can make these predictions based on short term and then long term. Short term are what's going to happen when we pull that dam out. And a lot of groups, particularly Pat and Paul, focused on downstream because the short term impacts are going to be downstream. Bolus of water coming down, the nutrients coming down, and that's scouring that's going to come down. So you're going to see scouring. So you think of all that sand and silt in Lake Kathleen. We're going to drain that to some level. So it's going to get suspended and come down. And for the algae, it's going to be sandpaper across rocks, and that algae is going to be scraped off and taken downstream. For these improved sites for the fish, we're going to lay those sediments on those sites where there might be good spawning grounds or habitats for larvae, and we're going to dump a whole bunch of sediments on that and change the nature of that for those larvae, or potentially destroy some of those habitats. In addition, the sediment comes down, so in addition to scouring, we're going to drop the sediment. It's going to come around the bends at different points in the river. Our map, we actually selected bends because we think there's going to be deposition of the sediment, and we looked at the habitats there so we can see what's going to change before and after. And then finally, you're going to see changes in the riparian zone. So as this bolus of water comes down, you can have an erosion event. You have a lot of trees and other material that comes into the stream that normally aren't going to be in the stream. If we think long term, my class actually kind of thought about the long term. And if we look at Lake Kathleen here, these two lines are potential new channels for the river to kind of choose where to go. One thing you notice is that this is going to be cut off, and this is going to be cut off, and then there's these two routes here and two routes here. So depending on the dynamics of flow, when we pull the dam out, we get channelization of a river where there was a lake, we might have new habitats, wetlands habitats here and here, as we no longer have some flow, we'll have very little flow, but we'll have water. Over time, you're going to see these organisms get lost, you're going to see deposition around bends, and you're going to see the riparian zone to slowly creep its way in. We're going to see macroinvertebrates come up into this lake that are not there now. These macroinvertebrates like flow, there's no flow in the lake, there's very little flow. We're going to see these macroinvertebrates come up. And then eventually, I think the estimate is about 10 years, you're going to see terrestrial plants creep in, resettlement of these areas that used to be lake. Eventually, you're going to get a nice forested region, probably 20 to 30 years down the road. You're going to get a channelized river. You're going to get resettlement of these species as they come in. What's going to be missing that will never come back is that planktonic algae, planktonic primary productivity that's in the lake will be gone. And some of these species, especially macroinvertebrates that are down in this part of the river that are relying on that planktonic carbon. And that is a whirlwind approach to a whole bunch of work we did in the summer. So if you have questions about projections of what we think should happen or what we need to do, but what I want at least the aquatic people in here and maybe some of the terrestrial people to think about what should we do in the next couple of years so we can build on this data set. Remind you again, there are 0 scientific publications that do before and after multiple old shoulder bubbles. We have it potentially really important stuff here.
Since this was an old hydroelectric dam, and we thought it all about looking at PCB deposition in those cores.
Yes. That's what we haven't done it yet.
Not only PCB, but you're looking at lead too?
Metals, yeah. It's also the west branch of the Maple River drain. No. So there could be things in there too.
So you could look at different mixtures between the two, being that it's hydroelectric dam that probably use one batch or one specific cocktail of PCBs, whereas the dump might have a mixture of 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 of them.
You could look at different congeners to see what the source was. There's actually fish data from Maple Bay and Fort Lake, and there's no indication that there's an
Especially welding plants.
very low.
Yeah, it's something that didn't, I like, you know, when we pull this dam out and get these sediments, you resuspend the PCBs, lead, mercury, copper that's in the sediments and let it clean that flush out.
Yeah, I don't know how imminent the removal is, but if we could get the ear of those that are going to be in charge of stabilize the sediments, leave all of that stuff in the sediments, let it get repopulated with wetland species, that would be far less damaging to downstream.
The plans that I last read over a year ago talk about a gradual drawdown of Lake Kathleen. Even in a gradual drawdown, you're going to have some resuspension. So the question is how much we mitigate that by gradual flow.
So this is a done deal, this is going to happen.
No, because you know, again, Martin addresses. I've been hearing about this dam being pulled out for the last 10 years.
And if it was, it would be done by the
Martin, you good?
I don't know. DNR would be involved, of course, but
Yeah.
the money for it would definitely come from private sources, probably.
Isn't conservation resources?
There was
You're
some.
kind of advocating for the dam.
Yeah.
So I talked to someone this week from the conservation research. They've raised a substantial amount of money towards it, about half the up right now is that the owner passed away last year, and the estate has given no commitment that they'll give the land to the wood trappers, or that they'll have Conservation Resource Alliance remove. So at this point, we're waiting for the estate to communicate with it.
So it seems because of what happened last year, this is in hiatus until the state figures out what they want to do. Plans have been made. Half or more than half the money's been raised to do it, but then there's this change. So it might give us some extra time to collect more data. Yeah, Bob.
Well, I was wondering, especially in the new channels that might develop in the, also see a big difference in really large woody material that, that really had time to develop there, and that might be some monitor as its importance with invertebrates and fish.
Yeah, we did some riparian zone transects last year, so we have some of the riparian zone. At least we can estimate the initial populations of plant food.
Claudia, go ahead.
Well, I mean, the fence is going to have to be involved.
Could I just ask anybody who doesn't have a microphone to kind of speak up?
Sure.
So, funny, there's an endangered monkey flower south of the dam. It's not north of the dam, I believe. And there's also an endangered riffle beetle that's south of the dam. I'm sorry, north of the dam, but not south. There is invasive species. There's an invasive crayfish south of the dam that's not north of the dam, and there are lampreys that are right at that dam itching to go. So I'm not sure what permits have gotten about all of those interactions, about the two endangered species and the invasive species. It's a complex issue. Yeah.
So it seems to me that I may be mistaken, but I don't know anyone on this research team who's sort of a fluvial geomorphologist.
Yes.
Do we have anybody who does that kind of work?
I'm sure Michigan does.
Yeah, well, so I think there's a real opportunity here to explore options. So I think what Rex mentioned was, gradual, how gradually do you lower that? And what implications might that have for dumping sediment into the street? How long might it take that stuff to scour? There are all kinds of questions that I think a geomorphologist who focuses on river dynamics would really be interested in. We might try to find somebody or some team that would start some of that physical geomorphological work.